non-physical guiding him to certain areas, because he was really, I mean, he was self-taught, and that's the thing, is self-taught musically, and then, you know, you listen to his interviews, how he had a scientific, he was very intellectual. Like you said, he was a nerd. I mean, he could talk to the highbrow people as well as anyone else, but he had a conversation, but he wasn't university trained, which would probably freak a lot of people out when you listen to his interviews. So to me, he seems very, very mystical, because he doesn't have the typical, you call it, print-oriented or literal, literate background, educational background, other than high school.
Yeah. He did sit in a composition course in academia in the college for a term or two.
Yes.
He did sit in classes and do some homework, but in general, no. I don't know if you call that mystical. I don't know what mystical means. Joyce seems to be mystical just because of his awareness of so many mystical, aphoristic doctrines. But is it knowing about God concepts, or... I think Zappa was very sensitive as a person. No, Bert, I'm going to reject that. I'm going to edit out your contribution of the last 5 minutes. It's totally nuts. I have no clue what you're talking about this mysticism. You have one chance to rectify, Bert. Are you even there, Bert?
Okay, if you look at how Frank adapted to what he saw in the music business and how he turned it around to use it as a stage to promote or to try to fight against his problem with stupidity and how he saw how the people were being treated, he used his music and any platform he could to present himself. And to me, that seems mystic in the electrical environment, from what I've learned from McLuhan.
Okay, mystic.
He was using he was electrical mystic.
Okay, did you not use the term before McLuhan?
No.
It's a new term.
I had no idea what a mystic was. Yes.
That's pretty weird. That's what jock life will do to you, Bert. You miss out on a couple of points there when you're 18 or 19. Every kid knows.
That's true, but I'm here, Bob.
Yes, you are.
But I'm here.
Making up
That's
for
the thing about jock life. You get beat up. You get beat up, but you keep coming back.
Yes. So, okay, see, that's interesting that you don't know what it means. So what are you thinking it means? What did you learn it means?
No, I didn't. Well, it just seemed to me, it seems like it's very, what do you say, woo-woo, where everyone says it's so mystical. It's so mystical. It's just like a overused cliche for me. So I really ignored it because it seemed like everyone's saying mystic.
Okay, wait. Now, you're saying you heard the word mystic through the years.
Yes, but I didn't know what it was. You heard everyone using it, but I never really paid attention to it. It didn't have a place in my world.
So how does McLuhan evoke your mysticism?
Well, just looking at, from what I'm learning about the electrical environment, just this whole fact of seeing that the electrical environment was an extension of the nervous system.
That's a mystical insight.
Struck a vibe. For me, yes. Because that's something we've been swimming, I mean, for me personally, to talk about me personally, that I've been swimming in, that I was affected by growing up, watching television, but now to look at it, what effect it's had on culture overall.
Yeah.
And to me, that's mystical. Because that's something that we're swimming in.
Yeah, I don't see how that can be
that
mystical.
We've been swimming.
Mystical. Yeah, we don't have a definition of your meaning. Does it mean sublime to you?
Mystic always meant for me mystery. So that's why I ignored it, because it was just like a cliche, mystery. So anything that's mysterious, someone would say is mystic.
Right. So how did McLuhan change the definition or your understanding of it?
When his statement about how electricity is the extension of our nervous system, that's something that I never thought of.
Okay, and you're calling that mystical. See, you mean something else by the word mystical. Okay, that's a new idea. You should say, wow, that's original, not mystical, unless you mean original by mystical.
Okay, I don't
see how the electric extension I don't see how electric extension of the central nervous system is a mystical statement. What is it? Use other words.
That's just something I never thought of. So I put it in the category of myst.
Okay, that means mystical to you is new and surprising. A new and surprising experience. Yes. Okay. So Zappa is mystical, new and surprising. And who were we putting Frank up against? Oh, yeah, Joyce. Is Joyce new and surprising? Yes.
Yes, for me. Yes, for me. Because Roxana just brought up something that I had no idea of, and it's something I look into, is that Joyce was a musician. I had no idea that Joyce was a musician. Right. I knew that he was an engineer, but I had no idea that he was a musician. So that's...
You know what he did? When he was like 20, 22, he went into a musical competition, and he almost beat out the famous Irish singer John McCormick. That's who he was up against. And Joyce couldn't read music. Yeah, he competed. He almost beat out McCormick. That means he had a good enough voice to be professional, because McCormick goes on to be a great Irish singer. But But that's how much of a musician was. He was so good he could be a professional. And you know,
couldn't read music. Wow.
Right. Or not when he was 22 or something. And in his domestic life through the decades, one of his favorite activities was to sit around, I guess, after dinner or something and sing songs, all kinds of songs, with his friends. That was his entertainment. And so, you know, you've got him with the ear genius, and you got Wyndham Lewis with the eye genius. That's what's interesting about. And they're Shem and Sean, and they're the symbols of the eye versus the ear. So you go to page 413, is it 399, and the battle between Joyce and Wyndham Lewis comes down to. Where is that?
I would like to say something. I think Joyce's greatest music was his compositions with words.
Yes.
He was in a way showing what you are doing with Diane.
Right. Here on page 418 is in the Ant and the Grasshopper section, which is a fable about Lewis versus Joyce. And there's a sentence there, well into this italicized part, and it says, an extent must impole. An extension or an extents must impole. It's almost like the idea of extensions of humans. Our media is right there in this thing. But it says, the narrator of the poem song, as I view by your far look, hail yourself to my heel. Party pre my thin winds, whilst my blink points unbroken on your holes, work the broads with totes, tridy right token on. My inrisible, that means laughable, my inrisible universe, you'd lee hod find. Such extra be foreignness, meet so vil behind. Your feats end enormous, your volumes immense. May the graces I hope for sing your auntship song sense. May the graces I hope for sing your auntship song sense. Your genus, its genius, it's worldwide. Your spacest sublime. But holy salt Martin, why can't you beat time? That's the final riposte of Joyce on Lewis. Why can't you beat time? Okay? That's an interesting statement by Joyce about Lewis. Are you guys there? What happened?
Yeah, Bob, I remember reading something with Wyndham Lewis that he was talking about time in a not so nice view with Joyce. Is that?
That's true. Lewis takes. He may not mean this, but you can take on the surface. Lewis is with Ion on opposing time. And his thesis was that Charlie Chaplin and all the arts of the teens and 20s were subject to a merging with time, and he objected to that merge with the flow. He thought that was mush or something. Yeah. But he is objecting to time, which is what Ion does. So then Joyce says to him, why can't you beat time? So is it a case where Lewis, because he believes there's no time, that he gets upset at concepts around him about time, and he can't let go of the issue? That's one reason why the other human in this contest in the restaurant, playing Joyce, came up and threw food at Lewis. I don't know, we played that or something, or I just thought. Do you remember that? Something? Anyways, why can't you beat time? Multi-level point there. Zappa, when asked what would he really like to know, he says, I would like to know what time it is. He just goes, what time is it? That's what he wanted to know. So let's see what Bert, do you have something to contribute?
Hello. Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, Bert. Hey, Roxy.
Hello.
Hey, Bert.
Do you have something to contribute, Bert?
I first wanted to say to Roxy that I'm hoping she didn't take offense to the post that I made.
No, she didn't. Roxy doesn't
take
offense. She doesn't judge anybody, no. Bert. She doesn't judge.
I was having fun.
Right now? You're having fun right now?
I am now. I just woke up, but I am ready for some fun yet.
Okay, we'll stick
so
with Bert.
Yeah, so the topic of conversation, now before I actually got onto the call, I wanted to click through to see what you guys had covered, because I was on briefly, but I was doing too much crap here to be able to speak, so. And what's funny is, before I went to bed last night, you guys were talking about Joyce, and also Thiel, and then you're talking about Joyce again this morning.
Yes.
We haven't.
Sorry, When you hear the archives, Bart, you will hear we interrupted the Zappa hour with listening to Nelson Thal discuss the 12 tribes of Israel.
That's what I wanted to ask you, too. Now, you have taken issue with Nelson for just, pursuing something that he finds credible, but you're taking issue with him just because he's pursuing that, or because he's been exposed to Ion in some way, or would have some reason to cast doubt on that, and he's ignoring it?
Was he ignoring? What was the sentence with the word ignoring?
No, I was asking. You were taking issue with Thiel on his view of the 11 tribes or 12 tribes.
Not Thiel. It's Nelson Thal. There's
Thal.
Don Thiel is the Joyce scholar and did the book.
Right, I misspoke.
Yeah, you're right. What
you're taking issue with Thal just because of his view on that, or do you have another, sort of personal gripe with that man?
I have many personal gripes with him, but on the view level, he's interpreting tribes literally as people. We interpret tribes as double helix strands.
The generations, yeah.
Yeah, and I know that he would think that was absolute balderdash, the whole idea. So I'm glad I'm not rational like that, where it's not logical, they never heard it before, and you miss out so much in Iondom. I object to that kind of bad luck. Nelson has bad luck. He's lost counting up the number of toenails in the genetic structure of Syrians when he could be here. What's the point of his knowledge, Bert? Where does his knowledge lead? You know where it leads? To being afraid that America has become corrupt and needs to be cleaned up, but it ain't going to happen. So he's concerned about Germany losing its culture, but he has nothing to say beyond that emotional concern.
About Germany losing its culture?
Yeah, the refugees coming in. So he will say those kind of things to illustrate chaos spreads, the beast rules, the 22nd chapter of the Book of Revelation is unfolding. This is his view, been his view for 30 years. He used to have a little opinionated piece on CKLN, and it was called Countdown to Captivity. That was his main point. America was going into captivity. You realize how great it is to have a solution, or it seems to be a solution. Many people agree to have that as a solution. Walking around with the RNA drops and all else, a lot of other stuff that Ian talks about. Do you realize how magical my life is, Bert?
I get to share in some of that. We all get to share in some of that.
I hope so. Yes, I hope you are.
I have so far, so your hope is a reality.
Now, Bert, we could assume Bert, being an African American, he's an ear culture guy. Do you ever notice how my slightest vibrational pulse shifts, he laughs, he responds to the little vocal nuances I do? You ever notice that, Bert?
You are good at, I think it's pretty funny. You are pretty good at that expression. Your vocal expression is pretty fast.
Yes, I'm pretty good at making Bert laugh. I can always count on Bert laughing.
Yeah, and Bert's from the Maryland, Washington D.C. area, which is where I'm from. So we share that background. I think we were there at the same time.
Oh, is that? I didn't know you were from Maryland or Virginia. Yes. I mean, Bart. I didn't know Bart was. I thought he just lived there. Yes, Roxy?
I lived in Virginia. I lived in Fairfax.
No, wow. Did you really, Roxy?
We are all from that corner.
That's around Bart's place.
I know all that.
Yeah, she lived there like from 12 to 15 for 3 years. You know what her father was doing? Her father was hanging out with the CIA. So little Roxy was running around, trying to prevent herself from going schizophrenic. So I don't know, what did you do there? You didn't have your Gurdjieff people. You just sort of prepared for the nunnery? Like, what was your thinking in that 3-year period, Roxy?
Well, I was studying music and recording techniques.
Yeah, and that would that be, didn't you start the electronic stuff before in Mexico, right?
Yes, but then I continued there. Yes.
Where did you find to do it? At a school? Music school?
Yes, there was a studio where they have these recording technique courses, and
right.
And I was taking those, and I was studying violin in the conservatory in Maryland. That's near the George Mason University in that area.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah,
how close were you, Bert? How close were you to Fairfax, miles-wise?
Well,
Bert or
with
Bart?
no traffic, it would be within an hour.
Okay, now Bart,
yeah, Bert or Bart.
You were closer. Bart, you were closer to Fairfax, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I lived in Fairfax. I actually moved to Virginia from Alaska, but I lived in Virginia from probably 80. I went down there for the summers, probably from 84 to 2013.
It's a long time. Now,
yeah.
Roxy, you lived in Washington like from 82 to 85, Roxy? 82 to 85?
Yes. Yes.
Right. See, we have our file.
Reagan era.
The Reagan era, yes, the first term of Reagan. And,
actually,
yeah.
You visited Leesburg, Virginia, too, in '89, Bob, and isn't that right?
We were all there.
We were all there. October '88. Yes, October '88. I visited Leesburg
In Georgetown.
I drove through there on a bus or something, looking at the suburban town. So I probably saw your guys' houses in a glance. I just looked and said, "Oh, what a terrible place! Oh, there's another terrible place. Can't wait to get to Leesburg and talk to LaRouche. Oh, another terrible. Oh, this is horrible. I hate Washington." That's probably what I was thinking. Carolyn found Washington a terrible vibe. She actually never reacted to a vibe like that. Ever that I know of, but
Really?
There's a bad vibe in Washington.
There's a frenetic vibe.
Oh.
I don't know. It's like a greed vibe or a endless bureaucracy, henpecking, jockeying for position vibe. Social climbing kind of stuff.
Bureaucracy.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a high turnover area. People go in there and make a lot of money, or move and make money and move out. But nobody live like the people who live there either want to get out or they're sort of more generational and they're aggravated with the people that are rushing through.
Right.
And are pissed off. Anyway, you sort of cut it. Like somebody drove through and said the traffic was so bad there that if they had to live there, they would shoot themselves.
You're there for the last year of her stay. And Bert, you're in the area all through the 80s, right?
Yes.
You see, we may have, like, when I walk along the boardwalk and see these little kids and see people, maybe in 25 years from now, I will meet a young woman in her 30s in some context, and we will not know that I had swore at her in 2014 along the walkway in front of the hotel that I said something to her. You know what I mean? That's what's neat. There's a lot of those kind of things maybe happening.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
Maybe she'll become a Maggie too.
Yes, I create Maggie. I am, but okay. So I'm in New York City. 1997. I go into Macy's. I stand there, and I end up arguing with the sales merchant. And then that sales merchant, 25 years later, is listening to Achieve Radio and hears us and likes us and sends money to me and thinks it's a big deal. And she doesn't know I was the one who irritated her that day in Macy's. How much of that kind of stuff goes on? I like that.
Well, you did say that you used to walk by Stephanie's high school.
Yes, that's right. 91st and 5th Avenue. I walked by Lady Gaga's school and looked and felt sorry for the little girls with their little Catholic kind of dresses, their school uniform, and marveled at the uptight world they lived in. You have to realize that I actually have walked around like a fucking god for fucking 80 years. That's my attitude, like floating along with no responsibilities for decades and feeling sorry for everybody. Reading the Wake and enjoying A Kid in His Arf by Zappa or Zoodalores or Clyde King. You get my point. Started to sweep you off. And then you have to realize, after floating around in ecstasy, I go home and the best cook gives me the best meals.
Well,
yeah, not only the best tasting, but the best
lucky
for
guy.
You.
What?
Yeah, not only good food, but good for you.
Yes, good. Oh, like something happens to me, it's healed or corrected immediately. Solutions immediately there. I wonder if anybody has ever. Yeah, if anybody ever had the opportunity to brag how good they feel every day to millions of listeners in such a casual way, I don't know. I mean, most people who might be blissed out saints, covered up by their sense of public responsibilities, they're busy healing people, right? Healing or fixing things or making miracles. I am quite a narcissist of my own bliss. Something like that.
Yeah, you don't see the saints able to sort of have a pause where they can just say, I feel great.
Yeah, they don't go, I feel great. I walked around for 3 weeks and watching the little girls on the beach blankets.
Like you said, the saints are always healing people. They don't have a moment to sort of pause and tell people, I feel awesome.
Yeah. You realize that the majority of my life has been feeling awesome. Now, I'm actually understanding what JW meant. About 4 or 5 years ago, I really get it now. He said, Bob, he was talking about the effective ion and drums. He says, Bob, soon people are going to feel as good as you've always felt.
Yeah, you're passing around.
Bert? Or Bart? Did anybody ever say that? People are going to feel as good as you, Bart. No, they didn't know you felt good if you did.
You have the original.
I feel good.
You have the original
awesome kind of mysticism. Now, this is mystical, Bert. This is mystical talk right now. This is the new kind of mysticism.
This is how the saints BS with each other.
Yeah. This is how those who are turning to gold, to quote Leonard Cohen, these are their final stories. But I've walked around totally disgusted with everybody, but feeling really great myself. Not like kind of a pity. Look at these people. Look at these people on the subway. Here I am on the subway. I'm stuck in a terrible subway, New York subway, like everybody else, but I do not consider myself suffering. I'm just looking at everybody else suffering.
You're actually able to enjoy your disgust.
Yeah, I was able to enjoy everything that I was doing. Constantly. Even I would marvel how stupid Nelson Thal was. It would not upset my enjoyment.
When was the last time you conversed in some form with Thal?
Good question.
Some emails, like I would, a couple of years ago, send him important whatever, Ion stuff or the Bob Show. I'd say with him and his girlfriend Wanda, who's now Wanda Thal, they just got married last year, and I know the whole story about that nonsense from his ex-wife Linda, who told me in August 2014 when I went out to dinner with her. She gave me the behind-the-scenes nonsense of that relationship. But back when they were doing their TV show and not married but hanging out, I would say, "You idiots, you are going to listen to this and you will learn nothing, but you still must do it." So I would send insulting emails to him. And about once a year he would respond about, "Bob, I did not know you had sent emails. I have someone else gather my emails, and once a year they show me what I missed. And I see you've been sending emails. I have not read any of them, and I don't know what's wrong with you, Bob. Why are you concerned about me?" And he would take the attitude that I was concerned and an idiot for trying to get his attention. Matter of fact, is it possible to find one of his emails in the trash? Don't want to mix up with his son. His son I'm in touch with a lot. But Nelson Thal, let's see if he got one of his attempt to insult me.
How old is Thal?
But verbally, the last time I talked to him verbally was when I was visiting his ex-wife in October 2007, and he walked into the house. He wasn't really allowed there. He has to make an appointment to show up there, but he showed up without making an appointment, and Linda wasn't going to let him in, but she let him in. Nelson sees me, and he collapses to the floor laughing his head off. Now, when he regained his consciousness and came in and sat down, I said, "Well, we're listening to this, Nelson." And what I was playing to his young sons at that moment was our first time on the radio, October 1st, 84. I had digitized it all or something, so I had it. No, maybe I'd gotten the guy who had the cassette tapes in Toronto who digitized them, so I was able to play it for him. So we were listening to the first time Nelson and I performed on the radio, and Nelson walked in. So I then finished playing it, and he sat there listening to it. I don't remember what he said after, but he started saying things like, "Well, Bob, I taught you everything you know," and he started making these ridiculous, reverse mirror statements. He learned everything from me, but he was saying that I was hadn't learned my lessons well, that he had taught me or some stupid stuff. So I just said, "Well, Nelson, I'm a billionaire now." He looked shocked, and "You're not a fucking billionaire." I said, "Yes, I am, Nelson." So not much was said, and then I left his home, and his sons came with me. We said goodbye to him and went into a car and went down to my place where I was staying. His sons left with me. I thought that was quite symbolic.
Yes.
So, looking for an email that is him. How do I find it? Which one is he? A lot of Nelson, his sons. So we go up here, looking.
This the Germany thing too. You mentioned that. I heard you mention earlier that Hitler, maybe it was known or not that the Germans had television first, and Hitler was the first person on television.
Yes. Maybe the Olympics. That could have been the Olympics in 1936.
And
yeah.
It was the Olympics.
What?
It was the Olympics?
Yeah.
Yes.
Here's something.
It was the first transmission.
In February 1st, 2015, Nelson Sr. wrote, "Last month you initiated an overture to me via my son. It sends a bad and too obvious message, so why not just email me directly and leave my son out of it?" I respond back to him, "Buzz off." I tell him to buzz off. So he responds, still a frustrated lad you are, eh? Mary must have been bugging you for you to give an insectian answer to a simple query. So he's making up this crap that I sent stuff to him on behalf of Mary or something, which I don't think is true. Mary did it. So he misinterpreted what I was saying or my level of involvement with it. But that's typical. He would say, still a frustrated lad, are you? That's kind of responses.
Well, he recognized your approximate age.
Yes, that's right. What's he say here? No, that's it. Enough of this nonsense. Let's move on. So, Joyce says to William Lewis, Holy Salt Martin, why can't you beat time? That's sort of ironic, that the fact that Lewis hated time, that means he was hypnotized by time. He saw time. He saw people misusing it. That could be a level that Joyce means. It could also mean that he had no sense of rhythm. He couldn't beat time like a musician. Hard to tell. So I'm going to move forward and read you a Zappa interview that we didn't finish. I don't think we finished it. And I need to just check to see if it's worth doing. So,
all right. I wanted to, just one note before we leave the Hitler thing behind. Ion said that we would see vestiges, or we would see elements of this initial Hitler television appearance return.
Yes. Yeah,
in some
I wonder
form.
what he meant by that. What was that about?
And Ion had spoken Hitler's speech before the attack on the United States, or justifying that.
Okay, yes, that's a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But just throwing those into that, getting them on the record, I guess.
Right. Well, they're duly noted. But I don't have a thought about it. I don't know what he means by Hitler coming back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think it was. Yeah.
Zappa's saying, what was your reaction to the Festival Hall audience last year in London? And we read this, I remember this. I was surprised that he didn't catch on to what we were doing quicker. And the interviewer says, they didn't at all, did they? They didn't at all, did they? No, they didn't. They missed the whole point of it. And another thing that's not generally known is that that the show cost us $5,000 just to get those musicians to record it, film it, get the costumes, make arrangements with the hall itself to put on that kind of a show. It cost us money to do that, but I thought it was worth it. We recorded a very good album out of it, which will be our next record out around July. So then the journalist says, I read in Downbeat magazine that you did a 45-minute set with Roland Kirk at a Boston Jazz Festival. Were you billed together, or did you just play together because Kirk was there? Now, Roland Kirk was a big jazz musician at that time. At the time of this, in the early 70s. I think it might even be 1970. We were, Frank says, we were on the same show, and I met him after. He had done his part, and I said, quote, would you be interested? Okay, so we were on the same show. I met him after Kirk had played. And I said, would you be interested in playing with us? And he said he didn't know. And I said, well, you've never heard the group before. You don't know what we do. If you like it, come on out on stage and start playing, and we'll back you up. End of quote. And then Frank says, so we played for about 5 or 10 minutes, and he came wheeling out there with horns hanging all over him. Remember, he plays about 3 or 4 horns at the same time, and blew his brains out. It was completely free, nothing planned. No, the other guy goes, it was completely free, nothing planned? Zappa says, no, he just came bopping out there, and we did it. Then the guy says, got any plans to record together? And Frank says, well, he asked us to, but we haven't gone ahead with any special schemes yet. Then the journalist says, recently Roland Kirk came over and played with Jack Bruce. We just heard Jack Bruce on apostrophe doing the bass. Steve Stills came over and played with Jack Bruce, Steve Stills, Buddy Miles, and so on, in what many saw as an attempt to revitalize the group scene here. Did your getting together have any effect over there? Zappa says, I didn't see that our meeting had anything to do with revitalizing any group scene in the United States, which was very sterile to begin with. But people form groups basically in order to get a hit. There is some evidence to the contrary. There seems to be a bit of creative work going into it, but there aren't many really creative groups in the United States. Beefheart, Captain Beefheart, is certainly an exception, and maybe one or two others. So then the guy asked Frank about a guy that used to be in the Mothers of Invention named Billy Mundy, who had left Zappa and formed his own group, Rhinoceros. What do you think of Billy Mundy's group, Rhinoceros? Zappa says, I saw them live in Canada, and I was very impressed with this one thing they did called Chickens. But the rest of what they were doing was pretty smooth, teeny-bop type material. These were tunes they were getting ready for their next album, and this piece called Chickens sounds extremely like the Mothers of Invention, which is why I like it. What do you think of the group scene over here? I guess it means in Europe. Have you seen any? This would be in England. Have you seen any? Only what I saw down at the Speakeasy a couple of times, and I wasn't, exceedingly enthralled by what I saw. What about the groups that we're currently sending over to the States, like Jethro Tull and the Nice or the Nice? I like Jethro Tull and the organist in the Nice very much. I think he plays very well. I also like the Rolling Stones. What about specific states, United States groups? I don't pay that much attention. There's probably lots going on, but I get pretty involved in my small corner of it. Who else are you recording apart from Beefheart? We have Wildman Fisher, a group called Alice Cooper. See, there he is. He's the first guy to record Alice Cooper. Judy Henske and Jerry Yester. We just bought 200 hours of Lenny Bruce tapes. We have Lord Buckley. The Police did him in New York a few years ago. And he was a sort of strange type of comedian, definitely an underground comedian of his time, which was the 50s. We also have a documentary album on the Kennedy assassination, the last one, which is very interesting. It's got all the actual tapes of the assassination, interviews with Sirhan in his jail cell, interviews with the witnesses telling what they testified in court and what the police told them to say. So that's about the Robert Kennedy assassination, which took place in a hotel in Los Angeles. That never came out. How did you manage to get hold of all that tapes, that stuff? Frank says, a guy named Doug Moody put the album together and offered it to us, and we packaged it and put it out. You were quoted as having Tim Buckley. Is it in fact Lord Buckley? No, we are going to have Tim Buckley as soon as his contract is up with Elektra, and that'll probably be September. So then the guy says, Jones says, well, thank you very much. Give our love to Captain Beefheart. So I just wanted to check, I didn't get this. Well, Roland Kurt asked them to record, but they didn't get back to him yet. Then the guy says, recently Roland Kurt came over to England and played with Jack Bruce, Steve Stills, Buddy Miles, and so on, in what many saw as an attempt to revitalize the group scene here in London. Did your getting together have any effect over there? Frank says, I didn't see that our meeting had anything to do with revitalizing any group scene in the United States, which was very sterile to begin with, but people form groups basically in order to get a hit. So, yeah. There's some evidence to the contrary. There seems to be a bit of creative work going into it, but there aren't many really creative groups in the United States. Beefheart is certainly an exception, and maybe one or two others. I thought he said something about England. Okay. I'm open for comments and commentary and tweets. Anybody want to tweet me a statement? Sorry, I didn't find too much there.
Well, I find it very interesting that he was not only interested in promoting himself, but in finding interesting musicians that were doing something different to what was mainstream at the time, and was willing to invest in this music that might not be commercial, but he was into the music, not into
now,
like he says, hits.
The kids?
Bands.
Did you say kids? Teenage kids?
No, because he said bands get together because they want to have a hit in their hit
Oh,
parade.
that's right. Yeah, to make a hit. Yes.
Yeah. Looking for bands that are doing more interesting music, not only a song that might be a hit, a trend.
Yes, Zappa was curiously old-fashioned, and he was a guardian of some kind of musical experience. Like he going around and checking everybody out and finding most people are not concerned about what music can really do. You know, he really was a custodian of old-fashioned ear stuff. You know, and he did outdo everybody. He solved all the issues, but it was interesting, like Roxy's saying, he went around judging people and looking for a scene that could be improved. A curious kind of babysitting. It's like he's a high school teacher going around looking at students in the music class making compositions, and he's seriously looking for new talent to come forth.
Well, talent in that.
And he was always discovering new music. There are some examples of radio programs in which he was a DJ, and he plays all types of what we call world music, contemporary music, pop, obscure bands from all over the world.
Yes.
And he was always finding interesting music.
Yes. Now, he would do that, but he would say that he didn't keep up on the music scene. He didn't listen to radio, so he found these bands in person.
It was not mainstream. He was looking maybe, for example, in museums or in collections of traditional music or libraries, other type of, not in the music store, but in
clubs,
libraries.
He would at night he would go to clubs and he'd see bands, but he would not listen to the radio to keep up on what was Grammy potential. But he shows Ringo Starr in 200 Motels turning on the radio and kind of ripping it off, writing stuff down and pouring coffee on the musical paper and smearing it, but sort of cackling as he listened to the radio. So he contradicts that statement about not listening to pop culture. He shows Ringo Starr dressed as himself, looking and ripping off or going to find stuff that he could satirize. But meanwhile, he's going around performing in festivals and he bumps into people on a one-to-one basis, and that's where he finds things he likes. But he has said, Roxy, that he was an anthropologist. So he may have been going around speaking as an anthropologist on the music scene. I mean, maybe he knew he was so talented that he could judge others. He knew he celebrated what he thought was good. So here's the point. There's this guy named Barry Miles, and he would do these long interviews with Zappa in the late 60s in the hippie newspaper called International Times. And I feel like reading a bit of this one. It's long, but he always did the best interviews back then. He really took Frank seriously, and he brought out a lot of information that no one else would have ever. So, are you guys into hearing a bit of this? Is that okay?
Sure.
How's the spirit of the troops?
Yay!
Okay.
Yes.
Gene types. I think the last line of the article by Ben Watson says the lack on Zappa and Joyce. The lack of a sensible, here's the hero, boy loves girl, I'm a bright guy, here's a sad song, meaning the lack of sensible, those kind of, here's the hero, boy loves girl, I'm a bright guy, here's a sad song, meaning was our Orgast, our Persephone, our Citron Peel of Lebanon. What did Joyce and Zappa want? An audience of freaks? Yes, indeed, sir. So he ends by saying that Joyce and Zappa wanted an audience of freaks. I don't think so. Okay, so here's Miles. Frank is speaking. We don't know the question. This is August 29th, September 11th, 1969. Carol and I are getting ready to visit Seattle and Dave Worster. So Frank says, there are some things I'd like to clarify about my editing technique. Well, this is promising. He's going to talk about his editing. The editing technique is an extension of the composition because as I have so much to do with the actual production of the records, as a composer, it gives me a chance to exert even more control on the musical material from start to finish. Like, I've already written a piece and I had it performed. I get a chance to mix it, you know. I get a chance to enhance it or even alter it radically by the volume balances of the different instruments. Then, after I've got that onto a piece of quarter-inch tape, I can examine it, chop it up, integrate it with non-musical material. Note that, non-musical material or material not produced with musical instruments, and include that material which would otherwise be considered as noise or environmental bullshit, include that into the musical structure, and use that as rhythmic counterpoint or as actual musical material as was done in Lumpy Gravy, which preceded Civilization Phase 3. To call that editing technique sounds like somebody sat there and cut out all the mistakes. So then he says, so I guess Miles had asked him what was his editing technique, and Frank seems to bristle at the phrase. To call that editing technique sounds like somebody sat there and cut out all the mistakes. I just wanted to make that point about editing being an extension of the composition, because it took me a long time to get used to handling a razor blade like that. I just recently purchased my own machine that will enable me to do that work at home. And now I spend sometimes 10 or 11 hours in a row just sitting in front of that machine chopping tape up, because I really like to do it. How's that, Roxy? You like that?
Yay!
Okay. Bert, you like that, Bert? This image of this guy loving to chop up tape.
That fits with his composition. When you stated he was at a school and he actually did something in ink pen with no mistakes. Right. So that detail, he's very detailed.
Right. So Miles says, I think the mixing and juxtaposition of different time levels seems very important to you. And Dave Wally went on to talk about that aspect, and Zappa playing with different time levels. Frank says, I think of the art of composition as time painting, you know. You're being employed by your audience to decorate a piece of time for them. In the same way a painter uses a piece of canvas and he's got to slap it on that, I have the opportunity of taking a piece of time and sticking little things on it. In a live performance, I get to do it with visual and audio material. On a record, I can do it with pieces of time from all over. In some albums, I've condensed as much as 10 years into one little piece of plastic. Miles says, this is presumably why you don't use electronically generated sound, because it has no time reference. Zappa, one of the reasons I don't use electronically generated material is that I can't afford the equipment to do it. The other reason is that after you have enough money to buy a synthesizer and get all the rest of the gizmos that goes with it, I think that before you make some kind of statement with an instrument of that complexity, you better get your shit together before you do it. I wouldn't want to just get a hold of a synthesizer and immediately make an album. I want to find my own way in that. Miles says, at that moment, every note you play has a time reference, like a year. One line will be a 1956 reference, another line a 1962 reference. Zappa says, yes, but they're not just references. No, it's not just, quote, now here's one from 1950, unquote. They don't work that way. Miles says, I've often wondered how much the idea, and idea is in big capital letters, I've often wondered how much the idea of your music was important. because you'll create an evocative musical condition and then break it up before it's had a chance to fully mature or condense, particularly on the numbers which refer to Schoenberg or Stravinsky as influences. Frank says, well, for one thing, the problem with the mothers up until now has been sort of a limited musicianship compared with what I wanted them to do. You know, although they're excellent players, some of the things that I asked them to do just turn out to be impossible. So over a period of time, we've been teaching each other how to play different hard things. Some of the things we can get into rhythmically now would be difficult for even the most polished orchestra, and we toss them off like they were nothing because we started playing at 5/8 and 7/8 about 3 years ago. That'd be 965. Now we can have everybody in the band playing at a different time signature, maintain a constant tempo, or I can conduct the relative speed of each instrument and make those tempos fluctuate against each other. What was that? Let me read that again.
That's pretty profound right there.
Yeah, I want to read it again.
Yes.
Yeah. Some of the things we get into rhythmically now would be difficult for even the most polished orchestras, and we toss them off like they were nothing because we started playing at 5/8 and 7/8 about 3 years ago. Now we can have everybody in the band playing at a different time signature, maintain a constant tempo, or I can conduct the relative speed of each instrument and make those tempos fluctuate against each other. Wasn't Ian saying that today? We've just developed a lot of weird techniques which probably wouldn't have much commercial potential elsewhere, but in one conglomerate batch labeled the Mothers of Invention, it has a sort of identity, so we're able to earn a living from doing that. What we're into now is electric chamber music. It just takes a long time before you can make that sound convincing. So I'm trying to keep the evolution of the group going. Now, this is August 29th, September 1169 is when it's published, but he broke up the band 10 days before. So this interview was done, let's say, in July, and he's talking about trying to keep the band together, but within a month he breaks it up. He says it just takes a long time before you can make that sound convincing, so I'm trying to keep the evolution of the group going. That's probably why he got fed up. They couldn't evolve as much as he wanted. But much as I would have liked to have continued some of those things which you say were cut off too soon on the albums, I just couldn't do it because some of them actually were longer, and I had to remove the extended section because it wasn't played well enough for the record. And then I have to rely on connecting it to something else to provide continuity. Where is that? So Miles says, do ideas play a part? Remember he asked about the big word idea. Do you ever refer to things rather than always have the music as an entity unto itself? Do you ever refer to things rather than always have the music as an entity unto itself? Frank says, well, Uncle Meat is sort of the missing link between the early albums, which were basically song-type things, stuff like Monster Magnet, into what we're doing, the transition into what we're doing now, which is a lot more like serious music, if you want to use that expression. And very little of it is vocal music, you see. A lot depends on how well Uncle Meat sells as to whether or not we're going to be able to even survive continuing in that direction. Because if you stop singing, the audience stops listening. You have to either talk to them or sing to them, but they're not prepared to listen to music at all. They just don't want to sit through it. They have a bad interest span for instrumental music, unless it happens to be glandular music, you know, those loud blues. They can dig it because they can tap their feet to it, but you whip a bunch of 8-tonal 5 and 7/8 on them, and that they can't groove with, and that they have to think about. Then you're in dangerous territory when you consider that next week you're going to have to pay your rent. So
that's funny how the speech is almost supplementary. He almost like has to include that begrudgingly.
Include what?
He's saying that you have to speak or sing to your audience, but they can't just sit through just music.
Yeah.
So it almost like he had this desire to play just straight music, but he knew he wouldn't be able to sustain that way, so he had to include lyrics and speech.
Right. And he would include absurd scenarios, use a sense of humor to, in a sense, mock the audience, but it wasn't blatantly mocking. But he was not that happy, I guess, with where he was playing. And he calls the documentary 200 Motels, and it's about the endless grime, I guess, of staying in the same hotels all the way across America. He said touring can make you go crazy. So let's see if there's some more ideas here. So then you're in dangerous territory when you consider that next week you're going to have to pay your rent. Miles says, things like the Reuben and the Jets tracks, that's the 50s music, are they essentially recreations rather than ... Zappa interrupts and says, oh, they're more than recreations. They're careful conglomerates of archetypal cliches. For instance, one song on the Reuben and the Jets album simultaneously has quotes from background chants sung by the Moonglows. The opening theme of The Rites of Spring, that's Stravinsky, there he is saying the rites of spring. It's singular, the rite of spring. In fact, the tune is Fountain of Love. It's on the fade-out, but nobody ever heard that as the rites of spring because there's like 5 different levels of musical accompaniment going on, not counting the band. There are all these different vocal parts, and they're all cliches, and they're all carefully chosen for nostalgia value and then built into this song with the most imbecile words in the world. Miles says, not all the tracks are like that. Some use the same old themes you keep playing with all the time. Frank goes, note themes or word themes? Miles says, old Mother's themes. It seems you're working, that's Mother's invention. Old Mother's invention themes. It seems you're working in 2 directions. In using these old 1956 sounds, even little snatches of them, you're working with other people's material, whereas old Mother's themes are original material. Frank says, I don't understand that. That must be happening at some unconscious level. Miles says, it seems to be the 2 poles of your music. One side, the nostalgic music, which you didn't write yourself, and attacking it, changing it, trying to work something out of your system with it. And on the other side is the new music, which comes straight from your head. The differences between these approaches is gigantic. So Frank says, I feel that kind of music. I'm very fond of the close harmony group vocal, ooh-wah, rock and roll. I really like it. But the scientific side of Reuben and the Jets is that it was an experiment. It was an experiment. Well, I don't know where it is, so. So he's saying, I like that kind of music. I'm very fond of close harmony group vocals, ooh-wah, rock and roll. I really like it. But the scientific side of Reuben and the Jets is that it was an experiment. Well, I guess this is where it goes. This is a Xerox of the article. So he says, the scientific side of Reuben and the Jets is that it was an experiment. It was an experiment. Convincing. So a line is cut off or something. Oh, maybe this is it. Okay. Reading that again. Talking about this 50s collage album. But you wouldn't know it's collage, it's just straightforward 50s narrative. But the scientific side of Reuben and the Jets is that it was an experiment. An experiment in cliche collages, which is much like Finnegans Wake, because that music was just riddled with stereotype motifs that made it sound the way it did. Not only did it give it its characteristic sound, but it gave it its emotional value. Like there's a real science to playing rock and roll triplets. Not everybody who can play 3 notes at once on the piano can play rock and roll triplets and make it sound convincing. There's little weird things in there, so there was a lot of exploration done at the time we were putting Ruben and the Jets together. So she moves out a bit while their house gets renovated. And Miles says, that's important from the production, the way you've restrained the drums, for instance. Zappa says, well, we scaled down the instrumentation of the group, and I tried to make it sound reasonably modern and also reasonably stereo, so we toyed with the idea of doing a really crappy production on it and making it sound old, but I didn't think I would enjoy listening to it over and over again at all. I like a little stereo now and then. I can dig that. We discussed different bands. We discussed different kinds of background chants and the emotional implications of them. Now this is going to show up somewhere. Okay, you guys can say stuff.
I was just noting that Ruben and the Jets was 72 to 74, and Elton John wrote Benny and the Jets in 73.
Right. Yeah. Still looking for where they pick up.
So he did this 50s sort of retro group that performed for those 2 years.
Yes. There was another band that played Ruben and the Jets. But they would do Ruben and Jets songs, the Mothers, in their own concerts. But they didn't travel around being Ruben and the Jets. Someone else did that. So we did the cliche collages. Okay, here's the part. So he's talking about making the cliche collages on the Ruben and Jets album. And he says, there's little weird things in there, so there was a lot of exploration done at the time we were putting Ruben and the Jets together. Miles says, that's apparent from the production, the way you've restrained the drums, for instance. Frank says, well, we scaled down the instrumentation of the group, and I tried to make it sound reasonably modern and also reasonably stereo, so we toyed with the idea of doing a really crappy production on it and making it sound old, but I didn't think I would enjoy listening to it over and over and over again at all. I like a little stereo now and then. I can dig that. We discussed different kinds of background chants and the emotional implications of them. Because I think that they have emotional implications, the same as morning ragas and evening ragas and things like that. It's a different level. That's where those tracks were at. Also the falsettos, the type of lyric that you would associate with a song that has a low bass voice prominent. Is different from the type of lyric you would associate for a song that's sung in 2 or 3 part harmony with a falsetto over it. So we were tinkering around with all these things. So he's talking about placing the lyrics in various acoustic environments. So Frank says, so we were tinkering around with all 3 things. Miles says, Ruben and the Jets is a difficult album to assess in Britain because of the different musical backgrounds. This makes for an unusual degree of objectivity. However, I've been playing the 9 volumes of oldies but goodies for the last few months. Frank says, but that's not even a good example because the oldies but goodies albums are presenting to you just the songs that were big hits. I'm getting ready to put out an oldie but goodie type album. I've made a list of the songs I want to include on it, and they're all obscure, but they're the weirdest of weird things that were released during the 50s. Songs like Rubber Basket by the Chips which was like 100 years ahead of its time, man. There's no words to it. It's all chanting. The guys are sort of making it up with rhythm accompaniment. And the only thing that you can really hear when they're singing is the words one guy says. He gives an example. Woody, woody, pecker, pecker. And the test of it all is all just this bizarre mumbling and grumbling, but all major and minor chords, and it's easy to listen to. It's happy and it's very surrealistic. Then there's another song called The Girl Around the Corner, which is the other side of Teardrops by Lee Andrews and the Hearts. And the lyrics to that are just incomprehensible. It's something like, quote, Butchie Stover makes love like Casanova. She fucked him 5 times in the eye, 3 times in the knee. Buddha McRae, she's crazy that way. We're saying, that's the lyrics. Butchie Stover makes love like Casanova. She fucked him 5 times in the eye, 3 times in the knee. Buddha McRae, she's crazy that way. End of song. Then
that visual space coitus.
Right. And then Frank says, and then there's a sax solo in the middle of it, and he's honking away sort of inanely. And then this one guy starts to sing too soon, and then he stops, and then it's time to come back in. It's a great record, really far out. So then Miles says, you were going to release this? Zappa says, yes, I'm trying to acquire all the masters right now. It's going to take a little checking around to see who owns them. You see, a lot of those companies went out of business, and others are just very obscure. There's one called The Drunkard by the Thrillers on Old Town, which is a recitation record where this guy tells of the evils of drink and the corruption of the young lad at the hands of a fast crowd and a bottle. Oh, man, it's horrible, says Frank. Okay, I'll read the next section. You are going to release this? Yes, it's horrible. Project X, that's a song on Uncle Meat. Project X doesn't sound very Schoenberg. Oh, does not include the top part. Oh, yeah, there it is. Project X doesn't sound very Schoenbergian at all and doesn't sound serial, referring to my review of Uncle Meat in International Times. When you say serial, are you talking about an actual mathematical balance of notes and rests and stuff? What the heck? Oh, sorry, I was reading that wrong. That's Frank. Do that again. I don't know. Where were we? So Frank says Project X doesn't sound very Schoenbergian. Sorry, I lost my place.
So I barely recall this now, but they featured Ruben and the Jets in a Cheech and Chong movie.
Yes, maybe some of the soundtrack. You mean, or they did?
No, they were in the band, or I'm sorry, they were in the movie Up in Smoke, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, they're referenced. I'm sorry, they're referenced in that movie.
Yes. So, reading this again, is he going to release this bizarre collage of different obscure records? And he says, Project X doesn't sound very Schoenbergian at all, and doesn't sound serial, referring to Miles' review of Uncle Meat in the International Times. It doesn't sound serial. When you say serial, are you talking about actual mathematical balances of notes and rests and? That's Frank talking. When you say serial, are you talking about actual mathematical balances of notes and tests, rests and ... Miles says, no, it's a misapplied term. Frank says, well, now, if you're going to review serious music, You've got to get that shit together because serious music means something very very specific. Miles says, I mean the way you refer back to previous themes, sometimes with a very short reference of only one or two notes, the rotation and arrangement of themes and musical ideas. Well, that's done on purpose. I can see that as being serial. There's also a type of serial rotation that I use with chords which accompany the melodies. Oh, here's an interesting thing about this album. A lot of it was written in the studio while they were recording one section of a song. I'd be in the control room, quote, writing the next score, and then copy the parts. The album was put together and basically by me, Bunk, Ian, and Artie Tripp, because we did most of the overdubbing, because they're the ones that read best in the group. Can't seem to find it. So he's at, I guess we did that. Well, when you use 50s rock, what are you trying to do with it? Frank says, you have a reference to the guitar solo in that one article you wrote which says, quote, Dwayne Eddy influence and not a trace of blues, unquote. I take blues-oriented material, and in that classification I also include the ooh-wah triplet-style stuff and make certain intellectual uses of it which makes it sound non-bluesy and non-rock and roll. For instance, I take the idea of the blues, first of all, as a particular kind of scale which functions against a certain kind of a chord, giving a certain kind of emotional feeling, as a byproduct of that acoustical phenomenon happening. That is to say, a chord with a major third in it that's got flat thirds, sevenths, and flat fives bent up against a regular major totality, and that makes the blues effect happen. Of course, to this phenomenon today, we have the fuzz tone and the wah-wah pedal, which tends to make just about anything played on it sounded bluesy. Hawaiian music played on the fuzz tone guitar won't sound like Hawaiian music, and neither would your favorite foxtrot. And this music is made out of, and look into it, the mind says to her. And I say, well, now triplets. Well, now triplets. Now, it's not Klang. It's not, well, he says, now triplets. It's not. Anyway, I take the elements that this music is made of, and I look at it, and I say, well, now triplets. Now, let's think. Basically, a triplet is three potes in the space of two, or in the space of four, depending on how you're using it. Or if you're Stockhausen, in the space Okay, we did that. Okay, this is a lot of dead air, right?
Get serial.
Yes, I'm trying to get serious. So, it's a long interview.
I'm just noting Frank's seriousness in all of these, musical, all of his departures, all of his, and all of his music. This thing with the doo-wop, if you heard that, you would feel more like it was just a nostalgic poppy sound, but he's giving such a scientific reason for his,
yes,
doing that.
Okay, here's some more on that point. Miles says, when you attack that aspect of America, are you using 50s rock in any way as a symbol? One of the reasons, says Frank, why the images in a lot of the songs are so West Coast orientated. What? What happened? Someone forget to mute? Are you listening? Anybody?
Yeah. It sounds like Bert.
Yeah, what's going on? What's that odd noise? This is a sacred ritual. Do not act up. So, when you attack that aspect of America, are you using 50s rock? Okay, what aspect do we have that sentence? No. Okay. One of the reasons why the images in a lot of the songs are so West Coast orientated is that I write songs sometimes to entertain the other members of the band and about 3 or 4 friends that I have in the world who know about the really abstruse arcane references in those songs. Captain Beefheart is one of the guys who knows what all of the songs are about, and he's just seen a few weird things happen. I get kind of a laugh out of the fact that other people are going to try and interpret that stuff and come up with some really grotesque interpretations of it. It gives me a certain amount of satisfaction. You can imagine how insane that must get on a song like Electric Aunt Jemima, which was written about an amplifier. Yes, it's a Stendhal amplifier, about this big, that I used on a couple of sessions. But there are some other references in the song, to a meeting held in the Denny's coffee shop in Lancaster, California, about 6 or 7 years ago, at about 4 o'clock in the morning. Don Vliet, who is otherwise known to the world as Captain Beefheart, and I were sitting in this coffee shop discussing what we were going to do to the music business, and it's the line about, quote, Monza, because we were discussing the problems of lyrics in the music. We were being fed. Okay, and it's the line about Monza because we were discussing the problems of lyrics in the music we were being fed on the radio. I always felt that the music I grew up with, except for the rhythm and blues, was just horrible, and I didn't want to be subjected to it, and I wished that I'd had something better to choose from. But I couldn't get anything better, so we were talking about this, and I said, well, I'm going to do this. And Don Beefheart says, well, I'm going to do that. And I said, okay, let's go do that. I'm going to read that last bit there. He's talking about the band, how they're going to break up. But he hasn't said about them breaking up so far. I always felt that the music I grew up with, except for the rhythm blues, was just horrible, and I didn't want to be subjected to it, and I wished that I had something better to choose from. But I couldn't get anything better, so we were talking about this, and I said, well, I'm going to go do this. And Donovan says, well, I'm going to do that. And I said, okay, well, let's go do that. Miles says, what's your music going to be like in, say, 5 years' time? Do you ever consider this? Zappa says, well, I can't worry too much about that. Something will happen, probably get more obscure. Anything you guys want to say? I think that's enough of that for now. We'll continue later.
I'm down with obscureness. Obscurity.
Did you say you're down with it?
True.
Yes.
What's true, Roxy?
That his music was getting more obscure.
I thought Bart was saying that about Bart's music. You're saying that about Zappa?
Yes.
Yeah, their decision to become obscure. I'm in agreement with that. I like that idea.
No, he didn't. We're talking the mid-'70s. He became, as Ben Watson says in the biography, he got into corporate rock. He was playing big concerts, mid-'70s to the end. He was hiring orchestras to do the classical music, the serial music, whatever it was, but he was putting a lot into his band structure when he started touring again. So he's just getting better at bigger shows. Some of the aesthetes didn't like all these drunk kids at his concerts. Maybe he was doing it just for money, you can't tell. But erase that idea. that he wanted to be isolated.
Well, no, I wasn't suggesting he was, but I like the idea. I like the notion, just as a fleeting thing. I like apostrophe, and it's because that's actually one of the few Zappa albums I've heard. But it also seems like it's more a conventional rock than his earlier recordings. Do you find that that's the case, or does he? Like, when do you think he starts moving into more not conventional sound, but something that becomes more popular?
He does it in 1973 with the album Overnight Sensation and then Apostrophe.
Okay.
It's a little more mainstream. People were shocked. It's not that mainstream, really. He's like above mainstream. He's better. And it was called Overnight Sensation, like he was looking for money. So he mocked it, said, here it is, Frank's going to be an overnight sensation. Well, he never accomplished it, but he did play all over the place and record it and then release those things as albums or other stuff. So, what are we saying here? He did not become obscure.
No, but I guess, and you don't know truly if he was actually doing it for the money or if he was decided to go in and do a subtle form of mockery of the industry.
Well, I'm reading an interview with him. What did you say?
Well, no, I was saying you weren't sure if he started doing that for the money or
No,
I wonder.
He didn't do it for. He would often comment that the money he made, and the more the better, would immediately be plowed back into rehearsing and preparing his next show. He says, I'm not like your regular rock and roll star buying yachts and things. He put it constantly into his, you could call it the Frank Zappa school. Now, there's a section here. He's being interviewed by Zigzag magazine. So then it says Zigzag Unzips. And this is like July 69. Frank Zappa interviewed by Dick Lawson at the Royal Albert Hall. So let's see where this one goes. Over the last year or so, you have been thrust by the press into a position where you are an attitude spokesman, that's quotes, for what is happening in the States, which is presumably why you were asked to lecture at the London School of Economics the other day. What exactly happened? Frank says, I wound up speaking to a large number of unfortunately misdirected young people. The other guy, who were expecting something political and sociological to come up? Zappa, I gave them something political and sociological. The only problem was it didn't agree with what they thought the tactics for a youth revolution should be. And I can't buy their tactics because I think they're juvenile. The guy says, journalist, they were sort of trying to bring the Berkeley thing over here. Zappa, yes, much in the same way as they imported flower power. Then the interviewer says, in September 67, when you first came over, you were shouting lines like, flower power sucks, when half the audience had flowers behind their ears and were cringing in their seats. Zappa says, well, I don't think I really made them cringe because when a person's really into that, he believes it for as long as it's fashionable. And the problem with the young people today is that they're not much more developed than their parents, you know. Their attitudes are slightly different in some regards, but the level of their individuality and their sociological development is only slightly better. And they are not, as they imagine themselves, to be the spearhead of some fantastic revolution that's going to turn the planet into some kind of Garden of Eden after they're done, because they're not. The main problem with what they advocate in terms of aggressive revolution and waving signs around in the street and boycotts and violence and all the rest of this stuff is A, it's a fad this season. B, they don't offer any alternatives or anything better to replace the current situation with when they get done with their revolution. I'm going to do that again. The main problem with what they advocate in terms of aggressive revolution and waving signs around the street and boycotts and violence and all the rest of the stuff is A, it's a fad this season. B, they don't offer any alternatives or anything better to replace the current situation with when they get done with their revolution. They're into revolution on a carnival level, and they aren't thinking in terms of the best things for the most amount of people. You know, they aren't taking into consideration the millions of people who probably don't want to be hip and groovy. They just wanted to be comfortable and sit around in their homes. And, you know, I don't believe that's my place or anybody else's place to tell them what they're not entitled to. So the interviewer says, it seems to me that you are not very choked off playing and talking about this kind of thing because you have come through Freak Out and Absolutely Free and Uncle Meat, whereas you say it's basically an instrumental thing. I mean, you're much more concerned with the music itself, the jazz, and it is jazz, isn't it? Frank says, no, it's not. Well, what is it then? Frank says, it's contemporary American music. American because that's the environment that created it, Los Angeles and New York. In fact, with Reuben and the Jets, it would make one think that any spare time you have, okay, so this is the journalist. In fact, with Reuben and the Jets, it would make one think that any spare time you have, which can't be much, you sit around listening to Del Vikings and Gladiolus records and stuff like that. Zappa says, well, as a matter of fact, I do listen to those sort of records because I have a large collection of them. But I listen more to Stravinsky and Varese than that, you know, almost to the exclusion of all other forms of pop music. So, did he say this? You don't listen to any of your contemporaries, groups and so on. Outside the groups that I'm producing, says Rush Limbaugh, during the time that I'm working on the project, no, I don't. Having recently befriended you have recently befriended Captain Beefheart. Zappa says, I've known him for 12 years. The journalist says, well, you appreciate he is a very big cult figure over here. I think they're in for a very big surprise as to what Captain Beefheart is into and where he's at, because the two albums that you've heard over here were, I think, extremely badly produced and beneficial, and Beefheart himself has complained. Beefheart himself has complained about what they did to him in the studio when he made those two albums, because the first album, it was studio players backing him up to a certain extent, and the second album mixed in a way that was a war, in a way that was against his wishes. I guess that's right, against his wishes. There were certain things that I guess that's Zappa's wishes. Are you still with me, people?
Yes.
Okay.
Present.
Right. So, continue with this article. I think we did this part. There were certain things that he wanted to have in there, and the producer took it into the studio and put that phasing effect. Oh, yeah, he's just talking about Beefheart and screwed up albums. We did all that. Okay, so. All right, so what do we talk about? What's next? I'm not going to keep reading. Anybody got any ideas? Roxy. Do I just play some Zappa music? Maybe that'll get you going.
Well, actually, let me ask you one quick question about, you can play, but I just wanted to say, I would be curious to know what Zappa lectured to those students, what he said to those students.
Okay, is that you, Bert? Did you drop off, Bert? I think you did.
No, that was me.
No, I've been here.
Oh, okay. So, did you want to say something, Roxy, about what I was reading? It's just a very good, in-depth interview about an album, Reuben and the Jets, that most people thought was just a one-off, toss-up, something Frank did to satirize it. Not that there was, scientifically organized patterns in it that Frank implies he did.
You're saying he was satirizing doo-wop?
No. You see from this interview how carefully he made the album.
Right.
A lot of editing. A lot of excerpting from different things. Let's play a song from there, from Reuben and the Jets.
Yeah.
So, Bart, how was that, Bart? Is that done seriously?
It sounds like it was done sort of, I don't want to use the word sloppily, but it sounds kind of like he's deliberately messing with the pacing on it.
Mm.
I mean, I was just thinking, if a 50s doo-wop band, if they were transported back and they performed that, what the audience would think of that.
I don't know. Yeah.
It has a very odd sort of, like, unusual feel to it as a doo-wop song.
Right, so he
like
said
a
in making it.
If somebody listens to that and doesn't, somebody listens to that and doesn't know who is singing or who's playing, they will never think that's Frank Zappa.
Right.
Yeah.
And he says that the songs are a collage. The songs are a collage of different cliches and archetypes from different songs. That's made up of stuff. I don't know if that particular song is, but he's saying that he would make a collage, like Joyce in Phineas Wake. He'd put a collage together.
Yeah. All the mythic
You can hear that the different
Odyssey in one day. All the romantic songs in one song.
Right. And to me, I used to love
all
the album. I always loved.
All the
I love the album. But listen, shut up. Listen to this. Yeah. Now listen. It's rich.
It is rich. Yeah.
It's richer than the songs of the day, sort of. I mean, equally as them. But I don't know if they're richer. But I used to listen to it and love the album because it was rich. For example, let me play this one. Another great song. Sorry, that's done years later. I'm going to go to the actual album and play stuff from the album.
But that's already, the beginning is wonderful. Love of my
life. You like that?
I love you so.
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you think?
The music is really good.
Yeah. Now that's in the 80s, though. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Now let's go to how it was done. That song on the album. So I should be able to find the album here. Cruising with Reuben the Jets. This is it. 1967-68. Oh no, that was Love of My Life, right? So we'll do that version. Here it is. Oh, I haven't got my sound right. Okay, I got to unhook buttons because this is coming out of my own computer. That this sound. Jesus, that was. Oh, I gotta stop this a second. That was awesome. That was amazing.
Perfected doo-wop. That's perfected doo-wop.
Right. And remember, the guys in the band did doo-wop. They were doo-wop guys from the 50s. They knew how to do it. And but I don't know, this just struck me as very rich version.
You know what that reminded me of, Bob, was the song that Tommy and the Shondells did called Crystal Blue Persuasion.
Yeah.
That
I know that song.
I later found, and I added it to Dupes. I think you picked up on it, but it was a version that he did maybe 20 years later, and it sounded like that he went in and recreated that song. You know.
Well, that's what Zappa's doing. He's recreating the stuff from 10 years earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do another one. I mean, that's so good. Somehow, that was so rich for some. I don't know. I haven't listened to them off the album like this. Here's another great song. Oh, what did I do? I had to shut off the sound. Okay. All right. Another tremendously rich production.
Yes.
Yeah, I have to say, comparing that to like the original doo-wop played on the radio, it has the odd tonalities of Zappa and the 70s, late 60s, early 70s. If you heard that on the radio, I think back in the 50s, I wonder how the people listening to that would take it, you know.
It'd be too overproduced. I mean, he's got his genius of working with studio technology to add something to it. I mean, just the drums, the smashing of the cymbals. It's like almost orchestral.
Yeah, and he's got that bass.
Yeah. It's too well made for the 50s. It would have, people, I don't know what would happen to them. They would probably think
there's more of a coordination between the singing and the music. It's not like in the 50s when they played, when you listen to doo-wop, there was like probably just hired musicians that maybe were just hired for a night, whereas you listen to that music, you could tell that those musicians, I mean, the singer and the music went together. I mean, it was orchestrated. It wasn't just like, you know, just a quick studio hit. It was really combined or
it's evolved
put together very well.
Rehearse, practice. Are you here, Roxy?
Yes, I'm eating a sandwich. That's why I'm muted.
Okay. All right.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. That inspired me to do the Thunders. If Frank can be that good, I can.
Yay!
Right. Okay. Thunder 1 on the first page is page 3. It goes like this. And I'll do it moderate speed. Baba bada dalga rag tak minaronka ton bron tonner ron twan thun to varhana once good tuhu hurden thurnak. And I do it again. Baba bada garag takaminaronkan bron tonner ron twan thun to varhun once con tuhu hurden thurnak. That's page 3. Then you go to Thunder 2 on page 23. Per cod hasker run bargi ragor yakor lea grum then gremit hunderhearth rumathuna radidly fiddly fetatilabili bum ulunun nakan unan. Okay. Do it again. Per cod hasker run barguar yago gorle or grum gremi bit hun hearth rumathuna radidilia Petiti to libilium molunk kunun. You notice no two thunders are said the same. I'm not saying the same way each time. Thunder 3 on page 44. Clicka, clacka, clask, akla, plats, klatcha, shadabeta, creppy, crotty, gradak, sema, sami, hunop, the pluddy, a pladdy, pecan, pecat. Again, clicka, clacka, cackles, cackle, opats, catch, labata, creppy, crotty, gradag, semi, sami, nuith, the pluddy, yapladdy, pecan, cot. Pecan, pecat, missed that. So, you see, I'm missing parts, redoing it differently. Number 90. The fourth thunder, page 90. Bloody, awful, Mucklenberg, Wurrus, Horace, Cortus, Strumpa, Parna, Kenny, Coxa, Patista, Tapada, Patuper, Strip, Buck, Putnak. Try it again. Bloody, awful, Mucklenberg, Hurrah, Horace, Cortas, Dum, Papa, Noren, Caucus, Pasti, Pata, Pataputer, Strippa, Paka, Putnak. A. CH. Actually, you shouldn't. That's not part of the thunder. Bloody Awful, Mecklenburg, Horror, Horsegour, Trust, Papa, Narpkenny, Caucus, Patapada, Patupa, Trippus, Ticka, Putnak. So then, Thunder 5, which the first 5 thunders go towards the eye. So the 5th thunder is about the book, page 113, and it ends with down mind looking at it. So your mind is looking down at the book. So it says, thing crookly eggs in every pasture, sticks likes him around, hers the magger, by kin with down mind looking at it. Thing crookly eggs in every pasture, dicks likens him around, hers the magger, by kin with down mind looking at it. Verse 5. Then you go to page 257 for the transitional thunder as you move toward acoustic space and tactility. So this is page 257, thunder 6. Lucadorn, Dunan, Duras, Kudli, Lucifer, Moi Pertu, T, Zeus, Fel, Nabortens, Port Kelk, Scan Sacroid, Verge Kapuk Kapuk. Lucadoran dun Durascutili, Lucifer and Moi, Porter to Zoe, Spelf, Nabortens, Porto, Canscroid, Verige Kapak Kapuk. Thunder 7, page 314. Both all characters shummin around gen summoner drum strum trum in hump to dump wall top of ululuder dar man's turn up. Both all characters hummin around gen summoner drum strum trum in hump to dump wall top of fuluderan man's turn up. Page 314. Then thunder 8. Thunder 8 is page 332. Papa appears in war heel nakatu how maka whack mac whack fall their Dublin on the Dublin daddy doodle. Papa appears on the war agrial natula mongan mac whack fall the Dublin and daddy doodle. I'm not even sure if I'm close. About 60% close, maybe. That was Thunder 8. That was Papa Appears. That's the big male image on the movie screen. Movies. Thunder 9 is about the airplane and speed and cars and cities in the 30s. Hassan, Kaffin, Coffin, Tussum, Tossum, Demandam, Caucasio, Kusaki, Boixa, Toots, Welch, Beckel, Cashel, Car Act. Hassan, Kaffin, Coffin, Tussum, Tossum, Damandam, Kosag, Kusag, Hebokes, Hoti, Peswish, Wek, Beckles, Kaskashel, Car Act. Thunder 9, page 414. Then you go to the last one, page 424. This says, Thunder 10. Hello, Turden, we're Mudgeard, Ging, Near Rud, Moller,